Hello, we are entering into the summer months, and every year I like to set myself a summer reading list of books that I want to read over the next few months. And sometimes these books are set in summertime or they just feel very reminiscent of the summer, but I want to discuss all of the titles that I want to read, and I'd love to hear if you want to join me in reading any of these books, or if you have read any of them, if you want to let me know what you think about them in the comments below. And if you encourage me to get to them or not. And I've been thinking about a summer reading list because recently I've been booking details for a summer holiday that I'm going to be taking in mid-July, so hopefully I'll have some extended reading time. And I'm out here in what I grandly like to call my garden studio, although really it's just a garden shed, but I can see outside the window here that there are lots of plants that are in full bloom and it's all looking really lovely. There's also a pear tree where pears are coming through. This always makes me think now of the novel The Safekeep and the pears in that book, even though the pears on my tree here aren't actually edible. But also I have a giant rosemary bush in my garden where every single year a single orange rose emerges out from the center of this big rosemary bush. And I don't really know where it comes from because we have other rose plants in our garden, but they're all different colors from this. None of them are like this single rose that emerges, and it never produces multiple flowers. It just makes this one single rose. But I like how it just kind of likes to stand out on its own. Now I'm going to go through and talk about the books that I am keen on getting to over the next few months. And the very first book I'm going to talk about is a classic and is actually a reread for me because it's by one of my favorite authors, and it is the newly reprinted edition of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And this was the original cover of the novel when it was first published exactly 100 years ago in 1925. So it is a special anniversary for this modern classic and such an influential book, and so I couldn't resist getting a copy of this new edition with the old cover on it. And of course, this story follows a middle-class woman as she's throwing a party in London in mid-June, and so there is Dalloway Day, and there's going to be a whole lot of celebrations around Dalloway this year because it's the 100th anniversary of this book. And so it follows her over the course of the day as she is planning out this party and as she is moving through London, and it follows the minute details of her moment-to-moment thoughts and her consciousness over the day, and you can actually follow her path throughout the city, which I've done before here in London, which is such a joy to do. But it's also the story of a war veteran who's suffering from PTSD and how he's struggling with that. So it's about these dual stories and how these characters' lives slightly intersect over the course of the day. But yeah, what a gorgeous edition of this book. And of course I've read this book multiple times before, but I always find new things in it every time I read it. Next is another book which is a kind of more recent modern classic, but which I've never read before, shamefully, and it's My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. And I've never read anything by Ferrante before, but I know so many people absolutely love her Neapolitan novels, and this is the first book in that series, following the friendship of two girls over the course of their lifetime of growing up in an area near Naples, and the many changes throughout their lives. And just recently, a member of my book club was recommending reading Ferrante for the first time, and I kind of realized that I've never experienced her work before, even though I've loved reading some books books by Alba de Cespedes, who heavily influenced Ferrante, and whose novels have also been translated into English by Anne Goldstein, who also translated these books. And so I think I probably will fall in love with these books as well, and maybe I will catch Ferrante fever finally as well. And if I do love this book as much as I'm anticipating to, I might just run throughout reading the all of the novels in the series, and I'm sure that will be an absolutely joyous thing to do. But if you've read her books, I'd love to hear what you think about them. Tamarin by Priya, Hein, and this novel is partly set in Mauritius, in an area which is kind of known as like an ideal tourist destination. And I'm not going to Mauritius this summer, but I feel like this novel will really evoke the spirit of that. But just down the beach from this ideal tourist location is an area that is known for taking many people's lives. That's a very dangerous area of the sea. And the story also follows a woman who travels to London to try to establish a life for herself, and then is kind of reckoning with a colonial past. So I think this sounds like a really fascinating book, but also it has a really beautiful cover that feels very evocative of summertime. I also really like to read some nature writing during the summer, because I'm much more aware of summer because I'm spending more time outside. And recently I read Raising Hare, which is a memoir that I loved so much. But another book I've been wanting to read is The Place of Tides by James Rebanks. And this nonfiction book follows the author's encounter with an older woman in Norway who still practices this ancient tradition of helping to foster wild ducks and collecting their down for pillows and comforters. And this is a tradition which is kind of dying out. And so he records his interaction with this woman and learning about her craft and changes to the natural world in Norway and the country's relation to the environment. And just earlier this year, I traveled to Norway, so it sort of makes me think of an earlier holiday that I had. And also I heard about the tradition of gathering down feathers like this, and so I think it sounds like a really fascinating and beautiful story. And of course, holidays always make me think of how I really don't like putting on sun cream, and so frequently I will get sunburnt. And there's a novel I've been wanting to read called Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, and this is set in a village in Ireland in the early 1990s, and it follows a girl who doesn't really feel like she fits into this place, even though she was born and raised there, and she's very skeptical about the path in life that seems set for her. There's a young man that everyone encourages her to get with and to marry eventually, but she finds that she falls for another girl and has this really passionate infatuation with her, and so it follows that emotionally dramatic story over the course of her young life. Lush by Rochelle Dowden-Lord, and this is a novel where a group of disparate people are invited to a special wine tasting weekend in France to taste some very rare and one-of-a-kind wines. But this expedition and wine tasting isn't exactly what they expected, and so it follows this slightly creepy and dramatic story. I think it's kind of a satirical type novel, and but the title of this, Lush, just always makes me think of how in Britain, at least, the word lush has a kind of double meaning, where in America I think it's more commonly used as a term for kind of alcoholic and to refer to someone as a lush. And once I called a friend of mine who talked about how he had a hard drinking evening, and I was like, oh, you're such a lush, but he thought I meant it in the British way, where it's more often used as a term for someone who is very attractive, and so thought I was making making this kind of compliment about his attractiveness, and then he was confused about whether I was coming on to him or not, and it was this kind of moment of confusion, until finally I had to correct him. I'm like, no, I meant Lush in the term of like an alcoholic, and just a kind of like jokey way of referring to him in that way. But yeah, anyway, the title of this novel made me think about that funny incident. Failed Summer Vacation by Heuijung. This is a collection of South Korean short stories, and immediately the title made me think about how often our holidays don't go as planned, and these stories are said to be dreamy and dark and lyrical, and also on when I'm on holiday with my husband, I often like to read aloud to him, and short stories are ideal for that, because we can just read an entire short story over a short space of time. And also this has got some great praise from authors I've appreciated reading before, like the author Jessie Greengrass. She says that these strange stories of isolation and longing will stay with you, puzzles you can't quite solve. And also the International Booker Prize laureate Bora Chun, she says her story force us to reconsider our reality, trace back our memories, re-examine our lives, a unique experience. Another recently translated book with a very summery cover is Vanishing World by Sayaka Murata, and this novel follows a girl who's living in a world where most people aren't conceived through their parents having intercourse, but through artificial insemination. But this young woman discovers that she was made by her parents, who fell in love and who did have intercourse, and so as she is like navigating this world and how she exists in it, it's questioning relationships and marriage and parenthood and the meaning of that within our real society in relation to this kind of fictional society. And Murata writes in a way which is often quite creepy and disturbing, but offers such a fascinating slant on the world that I'm really curious to read another book by her. Another novel with a very summery cover is Dream State by Eric Puchner, and this book has been getting quite a lot of attention, and I've heard very competing things about it, which makes me very curious to know what I will make of this story. And the book begins, at least initially, with a young woman who is going to be married, and she travels to this idyllic lakeside residence cabin to finalize plans for her marriage, but her fiance chooses his old best friend to officiate their wedding, and she disagrees with this decision, but I've been told this is just the very beginning of the story, and the tale goes to a very different place. So I'm also curious to see where this story will eventually go. And the final book on my summer reading list is the graphic memoir Ginseng Roots by Craig Thompson, where the author recounts in his childhood how he and his siblings would work on a farm in rural Wisconsin harvesting ginseng, and but also it reflects upon their Chinese heritage and their place in America. And I've heard amazing things about this book, and I've been wanting to read more graphic novels and graphic memoirs, and I just think it's such an interesting, different way of experiencing a story from just text narrative. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting to this, as well as the other books on my list. And like I said, I'd love to know if you'd like to join me in reading any of these books, or if you have read any of them, if you would recommend that I prioritize some over than others, or if there are any other books that you are planning to read over the summer months. I would love to hear about that in the comments below. But I hope you have a wonderful summer and get lots of reading done, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.